Morning, friends. Now, this is a story that's a little off topic from a lot of the stuff I normally talk about, but sometimes I find some stories interesting and I like to bring them up to you guys to contemplate, at least. And there's no conspiracy theories here. It's just thoughts of what might be happening. But last week, we heard a lot of news stories coming out about Boeing planes. Here's just a couple of the headlines. Plane was nosediving. United Airlines Boeing 737 engine erupts in flames over Texas. CBS News reported American Airjet clipped Frontier Jet, a Miami International Airport tarmac. Boeing 737 MAX jet veers off runway in Houston, making third incident in a week. Tire separates from Boeing 777, crushes cars in San Francisco parking lot. SFO MEX United flight makes emergency landing at LAX due to hydraulic failure. And there were a lot of headlines about United last week as well. Although, as much as United is a horrible airline, and I will never fly United again, ever, the reality is that this all seems to be centered, the only common denominator in all of these reports that we're hearing is Boeing. Boeing, 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 right? It's interesting because last week there were a lot of rumors about maybe this is DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring. And that's an interesting way of looking at this. I do think that, we've moved away from a hiring system where we base things upon people's qualifications and we base it on other things. And I think that could lead to some of these issues in the long run with a lot of these companies. And I wanted to get into that a little bit, but there are other theories here as well. So this isn't all about DEI. I think personally that employers should do blind hiring. They look at a resume, they don't see the name, they don't see a picture of the person, they look at the qualifications, and then they can move on to the next step. Eventually, yes, they're gonna have that face-to-face, but the reality is that DEI has resurfaced racism in different ways. And so it really is a bad thing in my opinion, and it does lead to hiring of less qualified individuals, and then these companies aren't even providing the proper training for them. Whether that or not that's the case with Boeing, I don't know, but there is an interesting video that came out last week from Al Jazeera, and they basically went into a South Carolina plant they got a video. Sorry, they didn't go into it. They got a video from a plant worker where they go around and they're talking to different employees. They ask 15 employees if they would fly on the planes they're building. 10 of them say, heck no, because of quality issues, because of parts issues. Now the parts for Boeing, a lot of the parts are made by Spirit, and I'm going to get into this in a second because Boeing actually is trying to buy Spirit. But anyway, so this video paints a picture of drug abuse, a whole lot of things going on with the employees at this Boeing plant.
This is a Boeing factory in the US state of South Carolina. Workers here in Charleston are assembling the company's flagship product, the 787 Dreamliner. But this footage reveals some have little faith in the plane they build.
Did you fly in one? No. You won't fly in one. Did you fly in one of these planes?
No, not really.
Of 15 workers asked randomly, 10 said they would not fly on the Dreamliner.
I wouldn't fly on one of these planes because I see the quality going down around here.
An employee captured the footage after contacting Al Jazeera to tell us he had serious concerns about what he was seeing. At his request, we changed his voice.
With all the problems reported on the 787, there's 90% that's getting swept away. Hushed up. It's an iceberg.
In another meeting, the source told us workers are often underskilled, uncaring, and in some cases on drugs.
I've seen a lot of things that should not go on at an airplane plant. People talking about doing drugs, looking for drugs.
It's all coke and painkillers and what's that other one? You can get weed here. This is really good weed here. They don't drug test nobody.
I know they don't.
There's people who go out there and lunch go smoke one up.
Do they?
Hell yeah.
Over the course of a year, Al Jazeera's investigative unit,
which does bring into the question, you know, what are their hiring policies? What are their safety policies? You know, how is Boeing running this company? Is this a cost-cutting thing? You know, there was a report the other day talking about how many companies are wanting to hire, I guess the proper phrase for this would be undocumented citizens, basically illegal immigrants, because of how cheap they are. It's like we're by opening the borders, we're bringing across a bunch of inexpensive labor. In some countries, they call that slave labor. And if you look at the last jobs report, ironically, the largest growth in jobs was in that sector, undocumented workers. Is that the correct phrase? So anyway, that video does bring up a whole lot of questions for me, and I think that this is a subject matter that should be considered, and we should, you know, vocalize our opinions on it, because I disagree with the concept of hiring people for any other reason than their qualifications. Now, the other thing that does come up, and Al Jazeera is a news agency that is run by a country that we do have some conflicting views with at the moment. But it brings up the question of whether or not Boeing is being sabotaged. And there were a lot of rumors floating around, well, Boeing could be trying to be sabotaged for a takeover. Somebody wants to buy them. You know, Boeing is also a major defense contractor with the United States government, and we are kind of at war. I mean, we're building a port off of the coast of Gaza. And so the concept of sabotaging Boeing is very interesting. I think that there are a lot of different ways that can go. Boeing could definitely be being sabotaged. But what made me decide to talk about this today is that on March 9th, we heard that the whistleblower for Boeing, who is a whistleblower on safety issues, his job was to go and inspect parts being manufactured for Boeing, was found dead in his car from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It seems a bit odd to me. You know, at the time that this happened, some of the executives of Boeing were actually in Charleston, South Carolina to testify from legal issues that have come up from this particular whistleblower. And it just all happened at once. I mean, it draws a lot of attention to that particular story. So if it's sabotage, there's no better way to do it, right? And I'm not saying, I mean, this could be suicide. He could have had so much pressure put on him from, you know, the legal repercussions of being a whistleblower. We say we protect whistleblowers in this country, but we certainly do not. I don't know what the deal is there, but it is definitely suspicious to me. It's tragic anytime somebody's life is taken, whether it's suicide or whatever reason. It is absolutely tragic. And the fact that this guy was tied up as a whistleblower with safety complaints against Boeing, with all of this other stuff going on. And you know, the Department of Justice did open a case against Boeing last weekend, and this had more to do with the Alaska Airlines door blowing off. But they didn't dismiss, FAA didn't dismiss a lot of the claims that this particular whistleblower had made against Boeing, and they were investigating those as well. So there's a whole lot of things going on around this company that creates a lot of suspicion, and I think it's a story that's worth following. Now, we, you know, over the past several years, we have traveled all across the United States and Canada, and a lot of times I would drive with all of our equipment and our filming stuff, because we're filming farms. We're trying to help, you know, get the message out about farming, agriculture, and why, you know, regenerative agriculture is so important. I mean, but then my wife and child would fly out to me, and you know, based on what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing right now, you couldn't pay me to get on one of these airplanes. I mean, tires falling off, engines catching on fire. If you guys remember, it was not even probably a year ago now when a United engine caught fire. There was something that happened with a United airline, and they ended up getting sued by the passengers for all sorts of stuff. But this is a very curious situation. You've got one of the largest defense contractors in the United States that could be being sabotaged, could be that. It could be a situation where we're starting to see the impacts of a DEI policy with hiring. People are calling it DIE, a DIE policy. And then you have this fascinating scenario of this whistleblower ending up dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Now, you know, he didn't seem like the type that would go that way.
One, this is not a 737 problem; it's a Boeing problem. And I know the FAA's gone in and they've done due diligence and inspections to assure that the door plugs of the 737 are installed properly and the fasteners are torqued properly. But my concern is, what's the rest of the airplane? What's the rest of the condition of the airplane? And the reason my concern for that is, back in 2012, Boeing started removing inspection operations off their jobs. So it left the mechanics to buy off their own work. So what we're seeing with the door plug blowout is what I've seen with the rest of the airplane, as far as jobs not being completed properly, inspection steps being removed, issues being ignored. My concerns are with the 737 and the 787, because those programs have really embraced the theory that quality is overhead and non-value added. So those two programs have really put a strong effort into removing quality from the process. When I first started working at Charleston, I was in charge with pushing back defects to our suppliers. And what that meant was I'd take a group of inspectors and actually go to the supplier and inspect their product before they sent it in. Well, I'd taken a team of 4 inspectors to Spirit Aerosystems to inspect the 41 section before they sent it to Charleston. And we found 300 defects. Some of them were significant that needed engineering intervention. When I returned to Charleston, my senior manager told me we had found too many defects and he was going to take the next trip. So the next trip he went on, he took 2 of my inspectors. And when they got back, they were given accolades for only finding 50 defects. So I pulled that inspector aside and I said, did Spirit really clean up their act that quick? That don't sound right. And she was mad. She said, no. Said the 2 inspectors were given 2 hours to inspect the whole 41 section and they were kicked off the airplane.
Basically, Boeing wants to buy Spirit, and yet they've had these inspectors go into this plant and have all these issues with all of these parts that they're seeing, and then a Boeing executive goes back on his own and narrows the issues down to just 50. Isn't that weird? I mean, these are some of the things that have been being reported. The passenger's door blown out midair, cockpit window cracked at takeoff, oxygen leak pre-flight, passenger notices bolts missing in wing pre-flight, lost wheel during takeoff, wobbled off, lost wheel after takeoff, midair. Plane arrived with cargo door open. That was an interesting one. They had animals, people's pets in the car, in the cargo bin, and they landed with the door cracked open. Landing gear malfunction. The plane skidded off into the grass. Engine failure mid-flight. Engine fire mid-flight. What's funny is the Boeing stock still trades at a PE of 61. You know, it's just a matter of time before something deadly happens. And I don't know what is happening with Boeing. I don't really have my own theories on it. I think they're all fairly interesting. The DEI theory, the sabotage theory. And like I said, for me, you know, there's multiple sabotage theories. There's a company takeover sabotage theory. And then for me, I think there's more of a theory of, you know, let's get the US to attack its own which the U.S. should investigate this company. I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but they should be investigating what's going on. But their own defense contractor. During a time of war, let's go after one of the main defense contractors. I don't know. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on this, and I think it's worth following, especially if you travel a lot. It's something taking into consideration. I mean, it's just simply not safe to be up in the air. And what's funny is they actually, you know, they posted an article, and it was one of those total damage control articles that was like, you know, airline incidents seem to be prolific these days, but it's still perfectly safe to fly. Guys, it is a matter of time before it's not safe. I mean, it isn't safe now. If these incidents are happening, somebody's going to get hurt. And unfortunately, a lot of the planes that it's happening to are planes that have already been through the manufacturing process and are out there for passengers to get on. And the other thing is, you know, some of these airline industries may not be maintaining their planes correctly. But like I said at the beginning of this video, this is multiple airlines, and only one company, Boeing, is involved in every single incident.